Hey, welcome. This is Elise Buie with the Maximum Mom podcast. Thanks for joining us. Today, I am here with Alycia. Now, Alycia, of course, I'm going to pronounce it wrong since we just joked about how we pronounce it wrong. Okay, you say it so I don't butcher it.
Gotcha. I knew as soon as I said that your brain was going to go right to what I said. It's Kinchloe, Alycia Kinchloe. No worries.
Okay, well, don't you think you should tell everybody what people do call it just so they can all share in the confusion?
So, yes, absolutely. Usually what I get is Kinchloe because, our brains like to separate into what we recognize. So usually it's Kinchloe. All the robocalls are Kinchloe. Every once in a while I'll get a Kinchloe. And I usually tell my husband, my last name used to be Mitchell. It was a lot easier.
Seriously, you went from very straightforward to complicated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. And I want us to get started with first, just tell us who makes you a mom? What is your family like at home? I mean, clearly we know you lost the Mitchell early on.
Yes. So I have three boys. I have a 16-year-old, I have a 13-year-old, and I have an 8-year-old. So those are the children that make me a mother.
Wow, you have your hands full. I mean, you are in full blown preteen mode.
Yes, I'm in a space now where it's like preparing my 16-year-old to go out into the world. And I feel like that's the hardest thing. As soon as he turned 16, I felt like the mom watching their baby get on the bus for the first time. And it's every couple of days, it hits me all over again. Like my baby's growing up and I got to make sure he's ready to go out into the world. So that's been, a lot for like the last few months, kind of dealing with that emotion,
Absolutely. Wise. It's interesting you say that. I mean, that's actually probably my favorite time of parenting is that reality of, okay, like it's really, I mean, the shit's getting real. You know what I mean? Like it is time that we get this stuff down pat. And I have found, I mean, obviously launching and step parenting 6 kids into launching, it has been fascinating to see how different kids go through this differently. Some are so enthusiastic about it and others are literally like kicking and screaming, holding on to the trees like, no, I don't want to be an adult.
No, you're absolutely right. I think that's the thing too about being a parent is just how different all your children are. And then as they get older, how they even change from how you, like, I just got used to you. How are you different all over again? And and they surprise you too, Sometimes I'm more worried than I need to be. And then, they do something I'm like, oh, you got this. You're good,
Exactly.
So it's great.
Oh, they're wild. I mean, it's funny, like, as today, just the day we're recording this, I mean, I woke up this morning to a message from a child that I could have never imagined in my life. I mean, he's a Marine, he's graduating from all these things. And I get this message, I'm a sniper. I was like, whoa.
Oh my God.
I'm like, okay, I need to take a step back because I mean, while on one hand, you're like, wow, you're meeting all your goals, doing your thing. And on the other hand, I'm like, that's an intense job. And I look at this sweet little child who grew into that. And I'm like, I don't know that you can do that job. But,
I saw that message. I was like, oh, we were going to talk about this today.
I mean, kids do surprise you. I mean, I think that you can't even slightly be prepared for the things they are going to pull out of their hat for sure. Well, I want people to know, I mean, because you are kind of one of those people that I watch from afar in amazement. I mean, you do so many things. I mean, tell us a little bit about what you're juggling.
Sure. So I have a law practice, which I'm sitting in now in Center City, Philadelphia. We service Philadelphia and 2 surrounding counties. We do primarily family law, we do family law, and primarily it's custody, divorce, and support, and some protection from abuse actions related to those things. So that's my family law practice. I've been here for a little over 7 years now. So it's been great. I enjoy it. I love it. Going to court a little bit later. this is what I absolutely love to do. So I'm glad I get to do it every day. In addition to that, I also own a hair salon. So that is a little newer. That's been going on 2 years now, with a large chunk of that being during COVID. Um, but I purchased a basically a turnkey salon from a friend of mine who was leaving the business. And so been running that for the last couple of years. Initially, it was kind of pretty smooth sailing. And then with COVID, it's been, definitely a little bit more difficult. But I
Right.
feel like we're getting our bearings all over again. And then we have a couple of brands with that too, a hair extension line and a makeup line that goes along with the hair salon too. So those are the main things. And the rest of the time I'm chauffeuring kids around and checking homework and all the other fun stuff that comes with being a parent of three boys. So that's my my life.
I I just can't even, I mean, the thought of running an entirely second business in a completely different industry. I mean, what has been some of the carryover between owning a law firm and owning a salon? Is there carryover or is it super different?
Well, it is different space industry, right? So a lot of those things that we learned about servicing our clients, providing excellent customer service, providing a good experience, those are things that translate really readily to the salon. So and some of the things I've learned about how to communicate, how to discuss, concerns about someone's hair, how it might come out. So what is your case going to be? Let's manage expectations. Holly Berry hair may look like this, but yours may not, and this is why. So it's, there's a lot of overlap that way. But then it is different, right? We're dealing with creatives, which is a little bit different. I think
Mhm.
some lawyers are creative, but not most of us.
Right.
And so there's a different personality there. But a lot of what I try to do is try to create an atmosphere and environment that helps whoever's working with me to continue to grow in their profession for however long they decide to stay with me, and also make sure that our clients have a great customer experience, which is the same thing I do, period, which I've been doing my whole professional life. So yeah.
Right. Well, that's really interesting. I mean, to be able to bring those management skills between the two and really be able to maximize your employees in no matter what setting they're in and really help your team reach their highest potential. I mean, that's pretty impressive. And I think that that is, I mean, kind of like management goals 101, really being able to do that. I mean, kudos to you. I just think that would be, I would have the hardest time, I think, with my brain being split in those different areas. Do you spend a lot of time at the salon, or is it something, do you have somebody managing it, or how does that look for you from just a week on, week off standpoint?
So typically I'm there a few times a week. I was there earlier today to meet with a potential candidate. And we just hired a new receptionist. So I was there with her, still onboarding her.
Right.
And so there's been times when I've been there every Saturday, every Sunday. We're a 7-day salon. I've been there every Saturday, every Sunday. I have other people who come in and help. My sister-in-law worked for me for a while. So it really just depends on what's going on and what's needed at the time. A lot of the time, especially when I have new staff coming in, my face, my presence being there is helpful to make sure
Right.
things are going smoothly. So it depends on that. And then when it
Wow.
comes down to like managing things, I do kind of set aside time to kind of work, make sure that I'm spending the right amount of time there. Because the one thing about running a separate business, which isn't necessarily considered your main business, is that sometimes you can treat it like a stepchild, and in a negative
Right.
way that we think about treating stepchildren. And that's not how it should be. Just like your stepchildren are your bonus children, it's your
Right.
bonus business as well. And so it's always kind of making sure that I'm keeping that to the forefront of my mind as well.
I love that analogy to think of it as your bonus business. I mean, what an amazing way to look at it. Um, well, one thing I wanted to talk to you about is, I mean, I hear a lot, on your podcast. I mean, you've had a podcast, the growth podcast, where you've discussed a lot of different things in COVID, like mindset related goals, other things. I mean, how do you structure your goals, both in your law firm, with your family, in your bonus business? I mean, those are a lot of goals to be setting.
So I'm definitely a person that works well with a plan and with lists. And I like to see it often. So what I
Right.
do is, if people are familiar with the book Traction and the book Scale, which is my favorite. It talks to you about how to outline your objectives for a quarter, for several years in the future. So what I normally do is I do my quarterly objective for both businesses, or all the businesses actually, because really it's four. for all the businesses. And then I write out the initiatives. And I have a list for the week. Like last week, there was 28 initiatives I had to get done. I got through 26. But it was like, it's like keeping that in front of me to make sure that I'm moving along the right path is the way that I do it. With the kids, they have their stuff, piano lessons, soccer, everything. So, it's everything's in the calendar. My husband gets tagged in everything. My support system, knows everything there as well. And then it's kind of talking to the kids, what do you guys have going on that you want me to put in here? And it's really kind of just following it. Because I work for myself, I can kind of be more flexible with my day than my husband can. So a lot of that stuff is still left up to me, but still making sure that I put in my hours for the firm, put in my hours for the salon, and not neglect my babies, which is
Right. Gosh, I mean, it's kind of exhausting just to think about all that. I mean, what does a typical week, like how many hours would you say you are dividing up between your law firm, the salon, and the home management?
Well, the home management, I feel like that never kind of ends at all.
Yeah,
Like I am a person who gets up really early. I'm up at 5.
yeah,
I'm usually in the gym by 6. And I do a lot of what I can around those hours where they're not awake because
right.
it's a lot that it's just my time.
Yep,
Um, During the week, for most of the workday, I'm working in the law firm, although I might be taking calls from the salon or dealing with things that are going on, but I might give myself about an hour or two during a day for the salon. On Fridays, we close the firm at 1 o'clock on Fridays. And for the most part, I'm not really working on Fridays.
right.
So if I'm not working on Fridays, I'm working on managerial stuff for either the salon or the law firm, and I might be at the salon for a while. And then on Saturdays, well, now that my son is soccer, that's changed a bit, but I'm also off the salon on Saturdays. And the rest of the time, it's family. It's, I had years ago, even before I started my firm, I remember coming home and going right back to work. And I
Right.
remember my son saying, like, Mom, are you done yet? Like, all right, can you spend time with us? And that got me. And
Yeah,
so I'm always cognizant of when I cut off, even if I feel like I'm working at home and I'm with them. So it's kind of the same. It's not. They still want your attention, even though they act like because they're teenagers that they don't, but they still want some of that time with you and want you to be present. So it's fluid. I guess it's the best way to
exactly.
describe it is it's fluid.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head. And I think being fluid is kind of the key to being able to juggle this trifecta that often a lot of us do juggle, being a lawyer, a business owner, and a mom. I think you have to be fluid. I mean, and not only just day to day, but bigger picture too. You might have a great plan of what you're doing and what you're moving forward. And maybe something comes up in your family, as an example, that's going to completely take a left turn. I mean, you got to be able to go on that road to the left, and maybe things are going to look different for a while than you intended. Kind of like you talked about with your salon with COVID. I mean, that
Mhm.
had to have been a major left turn.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Being shut down completely for several months, and in the meantime, work courts are closed and trying to make sure. And I have both businesses basically almost come to a halt,
Right.
completely. After a few weeks, the law firm picked back up, but it was kind of, it was done. And the kids are virtual schooling. So then, that's the other part of it too. So, and they virtual schooled all last year. That was difficult. Like I was counting down to summer. But you just kind of being, and I was talking to my middle child about this too, um, just kind of being open to understanding that things are going to happen in our lives that we can't control. What we
Totally.
can't control is how we deal with it. We can also control how we prepare for the unexpected by preparing for what we know we can prepare for. So it's, it makes it a little bit easier to adjust if you deal with the things that you can control right now, than
Absolutely.
deal with the things that you can't control, like your kid missing the bus this morning. So it's, those are the things that you kind of, you just kind of roll with it, and that's
Absolutely.
roll. Give yourself grace and roll with it.
Well, I think that, I mean, if we could scream that from the rooftops to give ourselves grace and to roll with it. And for me, it was also to add in humor. I mean,
Oh
all
yeah,
the times that a kid missed a bus or left their homework somewhere or, didn't tell me about some project until the last minute. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, as you can imagine. But
absolutely.
learning to not get wrapped around the axle about all those things, because I mean, life is too short. And if those are the biggest of my problems in a typical week, I mean, hallelujah, that was a beautiful week. I mean, like,
Exactly,
you know,
exactly. Like this child had, like I said, I think he's trying to get me to prove how much I love him, because he's been hitting me with like, again, this is my mostly prepared child. So I'm like, I don't understand. But to your point about adding humor, there was a crisscross song a long time ago called I Missed the Bus. So when he got in the car, I played that all the way to school.
oh
And
yeah,
he was like, Mom, really? Really? And I mean, that is what it is. Like I could choose to ruin his day by being really upset. And
totally.
why? It happens. It happens.
Exactly. Well, and I mean, I don't know about you, but I have definitely run in places at the very last minute before. And had there been a bus, I probably would have missed it. And so,
Yes.
I mean, so many times I would see what my kids would do or the problems they'd have. And I'd be like, I think I've done that about 6 million times.
Exactly. Exactly.
And I struggle a lot with the hypocrisy of parenting,
Oh,
just the idea of kind of like, oh, well, I never do that, or, that is not how it's done in our house. And I'm like, oh, okay. So yeah, I do throw my clothes on the floor sometimes, or I don't really feel like putting the dishes in the dishwasher all the time, or, whatever. I don't want to pick up dog poo. I mean,
yes.
just, you
It's
know,
that, it's really that, or just the idea, we have the running joke, right? That before I have my coffee, don't talk to me, or I'm grumpy in the morning to have my coffee. But when our kids are grumpy, when they're going through things, we expect them to, always be well behaved, be happy,
right.
and it's not realistic. We understand that in ourselves, we don't expect that, and in other adults, we don't expect it. But in our children, we expect them to be perfect little machines that we can't be that. They can't be that, and we shouldn't expect that of them.
And I
So
think, I mean, the word choice you use, machines, like they're not machines. And I think you're exactly right. We can't expect that. And sometimes that means they're going to be grumpy and they're not going to do what they're supposed to do, or they don't want to. I
mhm,
mean, and they're maybe grumpy about putting their dishes in the dishwasher. Yeah. I mean, obviously mine mostly are gone now. We've launched kid number 6 in the last few weeks.
mhm,
And it is it's very, I mean, it's, and people say it all the time. They don't want to hear, that kids grow up fast. They really do grow up fast though. But more important than that, your relationship with them moving on into young adulthood, I think is such an important thing, because talk about a time when children need to be able to have a solid relationship with their parents. And if they haven't had any type of real, authentic relationship, where they can be grumpy, they can
mhm.
make mistakes, their failures are not, these huge ordeals. I mean, we all fail, or at least we do in our family. I mean, all of us. And being able to work through failure and learn from failure, I think is really important. And I think it helps children as they become young adults to be able to try things on and not, go to college and get all wrapped around the axle about college right away. It's like, I mean, you got to go figure this out.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And then even in keeping with that idea, we need to be mindful of how we talk to our children. Just how we talk about how we talk to ourselves, and how that inner voice is very important. Our voices to our children can become their inner voices. And I'm
Yeah,
very cognizant of the way that even the way that I discipline, the way that I may criticize. I don't want, the way that I talk to my children to be an inner voice that's negative. That's really bad. That's not helpful to them. So
right.
that's something I think to keep in mind too, is how are we talking to our children, and how is that affecting their inner voice, and reminding them that how they talk to themselves is important too. And that's something they can learn, a skill they can learn at an early age.
It's such a good point. I mean, I really appreciate that point, and it's something I have really struggled with. My children say that I have a robotic, angry tone. And like, even in text, they'll say things like, "You're yelling at me." And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I never write in caps. I always write in complete sentences. Like, I mean, my texts are like grammatically kind of correct. But they used to say that they felt like I was really angry. And so it was really interesting to try to understand how that, because to them, text was a much more casual vehicle of communicating, and everything was, abbreviated, and it wasn't in complete sentences. And so my children would read these out loud to me, to be like, "Please, unload the dishwasher when you return from football. Good luck at school today," or whatever. And they're like, "You were so mad." And I was like, that is not me mad. But They
what
thought
helped?
because it was in like a fancy tone, they thought it was me mad.
One time that helped has been emojis. Emojis. That's because I've had the same issue, and I tell people all the time, like my father was a drill sergeant preacher, and he has a very serious face, very, but he's not like mean or any of that, but people would tell him still. And my aunt would say, "You have your face," and I'm like, "Okay, same," So I just
I think we might have gotten disconnected, or one of our internet is unstable. Can you hear me?
now I can hear you.
Oh, good. Yeah, I was going to say, I do emojis too with my law firm. I mean, I get joked with all the time, that I'm the boss that always sends emojis, but I have to kind of unformalize whatever I'm trying to say, that I don't mean it to be so formal.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I'm
Oh,
gonna
good.
switch the video off and see if that helps a little bit. I'm so sorry.
No worries at all. You never know with Zoom. I mean, who knows? Totally could be my internet. No control over the internet gods. I only wish we could, huh? Because then we wouldn't have court hearings with unstable internet. Is that something that's ever happened to you during COVID?
Oh yes, it did happen to me during like day long trial. Yes, like towards the end, like made it the entire day, and then just kind of got kicked off. So yeah,
Yeah,
I've definitely been there, but we're back in
totally.
person now.
Oh yeah, it
For the best
happens.
word, so
We've been waiting for
don't have
Starlink
that issue. Yeah.
to come out here. Elon Musk's internet thing is apparently going to come out to where we are. And my son has been like waiting eagerly since June. He looks like every week he's like, I wonder when it's really going to be available. He's totally excited about that. Well, tell us a little bit about, how do you deal with, when you think of work-life balance? I mean, really being able to get that balance so that you feel like you do have time for yourself, you have time for your children, you have time for your work, time for your husband. I mean, do you use delegation? I mean, what do you use to really try to get that balance?
So delegation is definitely a great tool. Having someone who can help clean the house, having is helpful. Schedule date nights. We do our date nights. We try to not miss them. That's extremely helpful. That's when I've been married for almost 15 years. I think that's like one of the biggest things that kind of keeps things going, is kind of making sure that we do spend that time. And I can tell a difference when we go a couple of weeks without doing it. I can definitely see a difference, right? Because you get wrapped up in the work and the kids, and it's easy to kind of like to lose sight of that. And then the other thing that I tell people is, do the little things that are enjoyable to you. Self-care doesn't have to be going to the spa, right, to a fancy spa on the weekend. It can be going to Barnes Noble, which is my favorite thing.
Me too.
It can be that's my favorite, my happy place.
Oh,
It can be just
grabbing
coffee. It can be watching a guilty pleasure on television, which we don't even have to call a guilty pleasure, but just those little things that bring us joy, delight, that make us happy, that may seem trivial or may not seem like we have time for. Playing your favorite song really loud in the car or before you walk into court. Those are all things that kind of help us to de-stress a little bit, but you got to give time to yourself. And I try to say, and one of the reasons I get up really early is to make sure that I'm giving time to myself first before I give it all away to other people. I definitely feel like that at the end of the day sometimes, but that first part of the day is mine.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. People have always made fun of how early I get up, and I wouldn't change it for anything. I love my
Absolutely.
morning hours. And I mean, sometimes I do nothing productive, other
Mhm.
times I'm super productive. But I get to decide that, and they're all for me, and
Yes,
I just love them.
yes, exactly, exactly.
Yeah, I think you make such a good point, though, when you talk about doing just small but daily things. And I think about that not only for joy and just that balance, but also when we're trying to accomplish something. I mean, sometimes I think we get a little, crazy with our big, huge goals. And I mean, for me, sometimes it's just I got on my Peloton treadmill for 30 minutes a day. Like,
Yes,
excellent. That was good.
that was the win. That was today's
Yeah.
win. Yes.
Exactly. And just taking a tiny step forward every day towards whatever your goal is. I don't remember. I think it might have been the Atomic Habits book, but when you think about doing something every single day, I mean 365 days a year, even if it's a tiny little step, that ends up being a big accomplishment in a year.
It absolutely does. You're absolutely right. It does. It doesn't feel like it in a moment, but it does. And you won't see the results of it quickly, but after a
Right.
while, it's a compound effect, right? You'll see it eventually, and then you'll be like, okay. And it gets addictive, which is great. You
It is.
that streak. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was at a conference recently and they asked us to do something. I was a virtual conference, I should put out there, but they asked us to look back and see like where we were 10 years ago to now. And when I was writing down the things, I mean, I was like, damn, girl, you've done a lot in 10 years.
Yes.
And it was really interesting because I think we forget to look back sometimes and really look at that cumulative effect of those itty bitty steps we take, because I, like you, operate in quarters so much of the time. But when
Mhm.
you really step back and say, okay, where was I 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 5 years ago? I mean, you see some serious growth.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think too, then we can kind of focus on the wins a little bit too, which we don't always do, especially
Right.
like in the nature of our business. Sometimes that one loss can hit you really hard, or that one
Yep.
thing can hit you really hard. And you're like, well, damn, like I hope three people today, avoid this or do this, but that one thing, felt bad. And I think, sometimes kind of recording our wins and writing them down and looking back on them, even every day, sometimes writing down something
Yep.
good every day can kind of refocus you from that one negative thing that happened.
Absolutely. Well, I had a thing last week where I had one day that was just, I mean, bad. Like I was just not in a good way. Everything I touched was kind of bad. And I don't know, just it was a whole day. And I'm usually super positive. Like I don't usually have a day that kind of just starts bad and gets worse. That's really kind of
Yeah.
rare. But I mean, it was negative. And all of a sudden on my feed on my phone was this picture of my four children that came up, and it was from a few years ago, but I was able to look at each of them and I was like, wow, I mean, a lot has happened in each of their lives, and I've done a lot to help shape them moving forward. And even that, like, how
Yeah.
often do we ever just acknowledge our role as parents and how important that really is? We get kind of caught up in that day to day, driving them here, dealing with, you
Mhm.
know, dishes and
Yeah.
whatever, homework. And we forget, like, I mean, we're creating and helping to shape humans who are going to,
Mhm.
lead the world.
Yeah, it's still, for me, it's amazing. It's sometimes like I'm driving my car and I look in the back seat and I'm like, I'm short. So like my two sons are older, are taller than me. And like I'm like kicking my feet. I'm looking back, like I cannot believe I'm responsible for you guys. Like you're so much bigger than me. But it's a beautiful thing. Like it's so enjoyable. And we have a lot of laughter in our house. We're always playing jokes on each other. We're always, doing a lot of silly things together. So, just sitting back and just watching them interact with each other, like those are the moments I wouldn't trade for anything.
I
It's
agree.
amazing. It's an amazing experience.
It
It's
really
amazing.
is. And it's really powerful. I mean, and I find my children have brought me so much ability to have perspective, especially on the work we do.
Yeah.
When I'm
Yes. Yes.
struggling or dealing with a high conflict family, or
Mhm.
something, I'm able to think, "Ah, okay, you guys are
Mhm.
going to be fine." I'm like,
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
it's all good. And the perspective has been really helpful through the years, I think, for me not to get caught up in a lot of nonsense that I could have gotten caught up in.
Yeah, I agree with you. Definitely, you're right. It's absolutely in the work that we do. There's been times when I've told clients, if you guys were in the same household, you'd probably still be having this fight. Like this is not because you're not together. It's, these are the things that happen and you have to figure out your way through them. And you're going to have differing opinions on how to parent. Like I do at times with my husband on certain things. So you
Absolutely.
just have to figure it out. But it does, parenting and doing the work that we do definitely gives you a perspective on how to deal with certain things and how to counsel our clients better, I think, to avoid conflict where they can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and so much of the time, I think in retrospect, you realize like whatever you were, having a big fight with your spouse about some parenting thing, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah,
It's
it's nothing.
really opinion. And you know what I mean? None of
Yeah.
us actually know what we're doing. Like, I
We just
mean,
hope we're just gonna hope that it works, that's
exactly.
all we can do because we never know what's going to be that thing that stick with our kids. We don't know. Every once in a while, like my child will tell me I said something. I'm like, that's what you remember from that
I
day?
know.
Right? Like how? And I'm like, I can't control it. So it just is what it is, and you just gotta put your best foot forward.
It's so true. It is so true. I love, I mean, there are definitely times where I feel like I've given such very important, meaningful advice. And the thing that they have picked up from it was not the important, meaningful stuff. Like, oh my gosh, that's a riot. I really appreciate you being with me today. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And I still just think you're kind of amazeballs being able to do all that you do. I don't know that I could have pulled off running multiple businesses. I mean, I just think kudos to you. And I love that it's a hair salon. I just think it is so awesome that you're helping people just feel great and look great. And I mean, that to me is also just so perspective bringing with the work we do.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a great conversation. I love following your journey. I love seeing all your pictures and your posts with your children. It's great. It's great seeing someone who does similar type of work and seeing your growth and things. It's really an inspiration. And I love the
Yeah,
podcast.
well,
This is
I'm
awesome.
so glad. And I really appreciate it. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and your week.
Yes, you too. Thank you.
Thanks, Alycia. Stay healthy.
You too. Bye.
Bye.